Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest ALNAP Urban Response webinar, the 10th in our ongoing series. We are very pleased to have with us today Edmundo Huerna and Andres Mella, both from the ILO and joining us today from Geneva. Edmundo and Andres are both members of the Urban Response Community of Practice and came to us with the initial suggestion for this webinar, so thank you both very much for reaching out and taking the time to prepare and present today's webinar, which we're really looking forward to. We can tell from the number of signups and all of you who've joined us today that there is an incredible amount of interest in this topic. I think one of the reasons that might be is because it touches on an issue that many of us have considered, that being the intersection between humanitarian response, recovery, and development. I think this topic of labor and livelihoods really is an issue where we could learn a lot from coming together, so it's an excellent start to have the ILO here to discuss their work responding to urban crises, as well as how that intersects with their ongoing policies and in particular the Decent Work agenda. I know Edmundo and Andres have lots to share, and we've had a huge number of questions come in already for the Q&A, so I'll turn the reins over in just a minute. We'll also continue conversations which emerged today in the Urban Response Community of Practice, including any questions that we can't get to in the time span of this webinar. Please join us there and share your thoughts with the community. Now to get us started today, I'd like to introduce our two speakers. Dr. Edmundo Huerna has worked for over 30 years on different aspects of urban development with particular attention to labor. His academic background includes a PhD in urban development from the University of London, and he has been responsible for the design and implementation of the Urban Development Agenda of UNDP's UN Volunteers Program. After a number of roles and consultancies with the European Commission, UN Habitat, WHO, the World Bank, and with local government, Edmundo joined the ILO in 2004, and while there has worked on issues related to crisis response in a variety of countries. Andres Mella is a lawyer and economist with research experience in urban development, labor economics, and humanitarian affairs. He has a double Masters of Science Erasmus Mundus in Economic Development and Growth from Lund University and the Universidad Carlos III. He joined the ILO's Sectoral Policies Department a year ago and focuses on urban economics and rural-urban linkages. His research so far has included labor issues in the construction and forestry sectors, urban poverty in China, the Western Sahara conflict, and recently, durable solutions to post-disaster displacement. We are very pleased to have them both with us today, and without further ado, we will turn now to our speakers. Edmundo and Andres, very welcome to you.
Hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, ALNAP and especially Leah, for organizing this and putting the webinar together. I'm here with my colleague Edmundo Huerna, and we're going to talk today about that intersection between humanitarian development work, but specifically on the livelihoods and labor aspects after a humanitarian crisis and during. You see there the outline. There's mainly three aspects which we're going to cover today. The first one on the decent work agenda and the challenges of decent work. Then a more urban aspect on urban labor and the sectors that it entails. And then we're going to talk about the specific decent work responses which the ILO and other agencies have participated. And there you see the Philippines, Pakistan, and Haiti. We will end up with a slide capturing a little bit the lessons learned and the key messages which you can take home, and providing a little bit some resources, but they're just not only of the ILO. I now turn to Edmundo. Edmundo, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you also from my side for ALNAP and Leah in particular for putting this webinar together and giving us an opportunity to present about this topic. So I will give a more conceptual framework, and this will be brief to allow Andres more time to present concrete case studies. So The title of the seminar is Labor and Livelihoods, and I will talk about the connection between these two concepts with a specific focus on urban humanitarian response, of course. Now, livelihoods, you may be aware, the concept entails different issues, different assets, such as, for instance, physical capital like land, housing, financial capital, social capital, among others. But we will concentrate more on labor, or else it becomes too extensive and it's a bit beyond the scope of our presentation to talk about land, housing, and other issues, notwithstanding the fact that they are also very important. And to talk about labor, I would like to mention the Decent Work Agenda, which you have on the screen. It is a framework used by the ILO and other organizations to deal with the aspects related to the world of work, and it has four main components, which are in the screen: rights at work, employment, social protection, and social dialogue. Why do I mention the Decent Work Agenda? Because many people who do not work very closely with labor issues, they tend to equate labor mainly with jobs, or in other words, employment generation. Employment generation, obviously, it is extremely important, but the other elements of the Decent Work Agenda are equally important in an urban context and in a humanitarian recovery context. So I will go quickly one by one of these components. So the first one is employment, and I will just mention quickly the fact that there are still many challenges regarding employment generation in urban areas in terms of the quantity and quality of employment, personal development, skills training, the formal and informal employment, not enough formal employment, opportunities for women, and other aspects. In terms of basic rights at work, the ILO deals with this through labor standards, and the workers' rights, again, is an issue in urban areas due to especially in the South, due to the amount of informal workers, of casual workers, gender discrimination in many cases, and also the existence of child labor, and sometimes also, unfortunately, the existence of forced labor. All these issues are related to workers' rights, and they do have challenges. They are challenges in urban areas. The third component, social protection and security, it entails issues like protection against accidents and disease, occupational health and safety, income security in unemployment and old age, among others. And again, we see many urban workers which do not have proper access to social protection and security, and indeed lack of access to social protection and security is also one. So the last component, representation and dialogue, we need what the ILO calls social dialogue is normally tripartite. It includes governments, workers' organizations and representatives, and employers' organizations and representatives to jointly discuss the problems and reach solutions. The challenges that we have in urban areas, especially in the South, in many cases, is that the formal organizations of workers and employers at the local level are small. Sometimes they may not even exist, and there are many workers and employers outside these organizations. working in the informal sectors or casual workers, small enterprises without a representative, and also to discuss issues beyond wage labor. Other forms of organizations are important. So, in short, there are many challenges in the decent work agenda. And why are these issues important? Why is the urban economy important? This is just a quick recap in this slide. Cities are engines of economic growth, and there is a need for a well-trained and productive labor force. At the same time, a large and increasing share of urban population that is this in the world. So we are talking about large numbers of people who make a living in the urban economy. So we need to deal with this, and large and increasing incidence of urban poverty, which again is a very important issue. So this is the situation of urban labor in general and the challenges. The connection with humanitarian relief and recovery is that in situations of crisis, the challenges that I mentioned, they are much more difficult to address. I mean, they are much more acute. So the responses have to be much quicker and much more extensive. I don't want to extend myself too much on this framework, and I think that we should use the remainder of the time of the presentation for more concrete cases, and I leave this with Andrea to deliver.
So, hi again, everyone. Here we have a little bit of a provocative slide on where should development start. You see there a picture on the different stages of a crisis. You see first a conflict, but it also applies to a natural disasters, and then the progression towards peace or towards the final relief of that situation. Normally, development agencies kick in at a later stage, and it's the humanitarian agencies that build up a lot of good work, and many times as they are different, it's a different job, a different work, that work is lost. So hopefully, like there's a little bit of a problem in the intersection between humanitarian and development work, and this requires that we both learn of each other. And well, just to say here that decent work and the livelihoods aspects are really cross-cutting, and decent work needs to account for the different stages of the crisis, but also the different levels at which it takes place. So it serves as this slide serves as an introduction for the next ones on the different responses that the ILO has, and different types of responses and decent work responses to a crisis. So the first one would be to create temporary jobs and injecting cash into affected urban areas. And so after a crisis, there's an urgent need to provide appropriate means for people to buy essential goods. There's an effective disruption in lives, as well as in the local economy, with local enterprises affected. Also by loss of their inputs, not only workers but also physical, and also the demand for their goods is affected. At the same time, there is an urgent need for debris cleaning, with dangers of spreading diseases really acute in urban areas, and the need for that reconstruction. So the different type of responses in this aspect include emergency temporary jobs to mainstream decent work, short cycle skills training, cash for work, usually focusing on reconstruction works and waste collection, and food for work, which is especially useful in areas where access to food is difficult. The next type of response includes building sustainable self-employment and micro and small enterprise development. So it assesses more the demand of labor and tries to increase that demand for labor from an enterprise point of view. The different options available here are microfinance through grants, loans and guarantee funds, business development services to establish and revive medium and small and micro enterprises in urban areas, the stimulation of local procurement, managerial training, and also women's entrepreneurship development. The last type of response includes the promotion of individual and collective economic recovery. Local economic recovery includes involves an integrated approach with employability, promotion of small enterprises, infrastructure, and participation in decision making. But and the types of responses here include emergency public employment services, vocational skills training, and local capacity development. We see here now we're gonna talk about the three different cases. The first one is on the 2012 and 2013 typhoons that hit the Philippines, Haiyan or Yolanda, where there was massive displacement of populations and destruction of the built environment. The employment situation wasn't perfect before. At the time, there was between 6 and 7.5% of unemployment in the country, with levels of poverty reaching 25.2%. Also, there was pre-existent vulnerable employment reaching 2.2 million people, and as a result from the typhoons, 5.9 million workers were affected in some way, not only losing their jobs but affecting their livelihoods. There were different vulnerable groups hit, and but a lot of them had to do with crisis and environment related sectors. And the key challenge here for urban action was to assess the urban poor and to provide a quick response from the international community. Here may sound late, but it was actually quite quick. The ILO implemented emergency employment programs together with the Department of Labor of the Philippines 1 month after. And the strategies followed after that were threefold, including rapid assessments of damage and job losses, the clearance and cleaning of works in urban areas. There was labor-based rehabilitation of community assets, infrastructure, and the built environment. As you may know, the ILO co-chaired the Early Recovery and Livelihoods Humanitarian cluster. And as I said, the main problem was delivering quick responses. And to solve the issues of delivering a quick program was to use local resource-based approaches for different infrastructure investments, and using labor-based technologies and community contracting, and working through local partners in local areas, which were already affected. These local partners by the typhoons in many ways, like the capabilities of the European administration were were severely affected. The second case is on Pakistan. On the so it's the 2010-2011 floods caused by monsoon rains. Well, but really in the last 10 years, Pakistan has suffered many types of crises, including natural disasters, but also different ones, including floods and earthquakes. But we're centering into this one. The unemployment rates ranged at that time between 5.3 and 6.8%, and there was a relatively low poverty rates compared to those of Haiti and the Philippines. There were 20 million people affected, and there was an effect on the large proportion of land mass, affecting food security in urban areas. Overall, there were 5.3 million people affected in their livelihoods, with a clear urban also rural component, but mainly the effects on urban areas was on infrastructure. So the ILO implemented the main response in this case was carried out through a Cash for Work program, which was implemented in 3 provinces and 6 districts, and it offered globally 70,000 person days of Cash for Work. This intervention of labor-intensive work, it restored healthcare facilities, also key infrastructure, and ensured access to pathways and roads and houses, the built environment, and construct pit latrines in the different provinces and districts. It's important to say that all employment generated under this Cash for Work programs observed international labor standards, including those on child and forced labor, which and discrimination in employment opportunities. And the main problem there was that the high incidence of child labor. And one of the lessons learned here is the role of private, well, all the different stakeholders were also the private sector on the reconstruction of the built environment and how it can be done through the principles of decent work. And here we have the example of Kiber Tunwa, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which took these principles of the ILO and rehabilitated 400 flood-affected houses and generated local employment opportunities. But it wasn't the only institution involved in this. The different partners also participated, from government to employers, the Employers Federation of Pakistan, Pakistan Workers Federation, the Pakistan National Textile, Leather, Garments and General Workers Federation, and in general the civil society and the humanitarian actors, of course. So the last case, the one of Haiti, the Haiti earthquake of 2010, which also involved huge physical destruction and displacement. The government was severely affected, its capabilities were, and the result was 1 million displaced people, mainly concentrated in the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince, of the capital. There were really high unemployment rates. I didn't include a figure because we don't have one exactly at the time, but Haiti was at the time, well, it is still the poorest country in the northern hemisphere, and with high rates of unemployment, 58.5% live below the poverty line. And there is a high incidence of informal work, which maybe later in the questions we can assess specifically. No? The main response here was through a chain development, generating employment to human settlement reconstruction. So the ILO participated with different agencies, with UNDP and UN Habitat in this project of debris and the debris cleaning, which included the whole process from debris collection, recycling of waste to reconstruction. And this generated employment opportunities throughout the process. The ILO specifically worked with generating capabilities, improving trainings and skills, and also the improvement, the creation and assistance of small, medium, and also micro enterprises. The main lesson learned here was to modify its initial strategy, because at a certain point the Haitian Ministry of Public Works decided to prohibit the production of structural construction materials that came out of recyclable debris. So the ILO team worked to identify non-structural products using that reconstruction so that the enterprises and workers could make products that are useful for that reconstruction and are useful for the market. Also, another key strategy and lesson learned there was to support the removal, treatment, and transformation of recycled debris in the same neighborhood. So the whole process was carried out in the same neighborhood, and also in parallel, entrepreneurs received technical guidance, but also business management skills. As a result, the project had both an economic and social impact by creating the necessary conditions for economic growth and enhanced the capacities of enterprises and workers. But there was also a social impact on it, which was the increase of income and revenues to improve the urban environment and the facilities, and it also facilitates the reduction of violence, as youth can access employment. And also there was improved access, it was noted improved access of people of reduced mobility. And overall in these projects, because there were two, there were 5,100 people benefiting from these generating activities. That includes also revenues, but also training. So a little bit on the lessons learned. What the main key issues are that the decent work agenda not only includes employment, it's of course an important aspect, but not the only one. And then urban labor as an opportunity, but also as a challenge. Then the lessons learned in crisis involves first the need for a quick response, then the importance of working with constituents and the different social partners, and then the last one, the work on value chains and how this can generate a virtual cycle in which companies and workers benefit out of a crisis situation. Here you have some resources which not only include ILO resources. We received from an email from Asylum, from the Community of Practice, this Global Refugee Report, Work Rights Report, which talks about the access of refugees to labor, and it's maybe I think it's useful to spread the word on this. Thank you very much.